Shivaji, are we waiting on Shlomi?
Yes.
Okay, while we wait on Shlomi, I wanted to thank all the participants and partners today. We appreciate your business and your partnership and your patience while we have gone out and built the training program. This is the first of many, many trainings that is to come on the technical side. I would like to take the opportunity to introduce Shivaji, who is our partner solutioning consultant in APAC. And Martijn is not on the call, but Martijn will be the solution consulting expert in EMEA. And in AMER, we're actually hiring for one. In the meantime, Jay, who's also going to be one of your presenters today, will help with the partner training and with the partner solutioning. Our goal for these trainings, this is a 4-part training, is to actually enable you on the basics of DevRev to build solutions. And then we will follow this up with architecture level trainings and also implementation trainings. We're going to beta some of these trainings in the next couple of weeks. With that said, I wanted to thank you for the partnership. And I wanted to make sure that all of you had the opportunity to answer questions and express your views with us. At the end of the webinar today, there will be a poll. And I would appreciate if you all are able to chime in and give us a feedback so we can continuously improve and generate the right content and right level of training for you. With that said, let me see, Shlomi is actually trying to join in. Give me 1 second and I will add him in here. Is that you, Shlomi? There we go. So the rock star is here. Feel free to interrupt him and ask him any questions. I will let Shlomi and Shivaji do their introductions. I will probably end up signing off. As you already can hear, I don't have the greatest of voices, and therefore I'm completely useless, so I'll go on mute. And Gregory, yes, our goal is to make some of these recordings available to you over the new partner support pages that will be going live in the couple weeks. In the meantime, if you need these recordings, come directly to us and we'll share it to you over Google Drive. I hope that answers the question. All right, with that said, I'll hand this over to the rock stars who are going to do your training. Shlomi, Shivaji,
right.
introduce yourselves and take it away.
Please, Shivaji, go ahead.
Hey, hi, my name is Shivaji. So I'm the new member in DevRev Solutions Consulting. Especially, I'll be working with the partner ecosystem and helping you build solutions and use cases with specific industries and go to market. Yep.
All right, thank you, Shivaji. And my name is Shlomi. I'm actually been with DevRev pretty much from the start. I joined directly from Nutanix, where I worked with Manoj and Dheeraj, building what we built there. And I joined DevRev initially as an engineer. I helped build a lot of the product that you guys might be familiar with already. And then in the last year or so, I transitioned to become a solutions architect. And in this capacity, I'm also explaining to customers and to you guys about DevRev and about the core platform. And I just wanted to say a few things. This is usually about an hour session. We gave it a little more longer so that we can, so you guys can ask questions and I can answer. I'm not going to necessarily go and show a demo. I'm not going to show the product itself. I think I'm going to have a few more sessions that will show you the product. What I'm going to cover today is more of the basic platform architecture of DevRev, and the hope is that it will help build some foundation in your mind about the different aspects of DevRev. So that,
words, phrases.
excuse me. So to build a framework in your mind so that you can then whatever you see, it falls into place and you understand how things actually happen and hopefully demystifies some of the things that we do. So let me get started. And yeah, please feel free to ask questions as we go along. I'm going to also pause at different points to see if you have questions. All right. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to start. Please let me know when my screen is visible. Just a second. This new Zoom keeps moving.
Yes, Tanip, could you also let in Carl as well in this call?
Just a second. All right. Where do I see people to let in? I don't see this.
I don't see him.
All right. Okay. So let me begin. So the first thing, I'm going to start. Shiv, let me know if there's anything you need me to do. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So you guys might have heard about DevRev's knowledge graph, and I want to start with that because I think that that is a crucial thing to understand and to kind of be able to tell, what does it mean? Why is it important? And what do we do with it? So the idea with the knowledge graph essentially is to be able to connect a lot of different tools, a lot of different systems, a lot of different data models, right? So if you think of DevRev's kind of general message or general statement, is that we want to be able to connect all the data within the company and help draw conclusions or show correlations, show progress, make sure the information is shared between the different parties. But the different systems all have different data models, different ways they represent their internal states and internal data. And those things somehow needs to come together in one coherent way so that a system can be built on top of that. Thanks. Let me see if I can increase my video. Can you tell me if this is better?
Yes,
Okay.
it's
Yes.
better.
Okay, perfect. All right. Fantastic. Let me just quickly get back. All right. So thank you guys for letting me know. This is great. By the way, I have the pane of your messages. So as you write things, I can see them as well as what I'm sharing. So please keep them coming. Okay. So the knowledge graph is the system that we bring in all the information and can put it together in one data model that can be interlinked. So all of a sudden, things from one tool can be related to things from another tool, or doesn't even have to be tool, just another silo in the organization. So maybe your support or your success and so forth. But if we look at it, let's see what things do we have, and I'm going to annotate on screen. So for example, you see we have these different objects with customers and users, and these are just example of some objects that we've built. This isn't exhaustive or complete in any way, but the idea here is to show that we can have different nodes, right? You can think about it in the regular world as tables, right? These are different tables, right? So we have tables of users, nodes of users, and these links are essentially foreign keys, right? So maybe a customer here might have user. So let's say in here, actually the arrow would be that way, right? But it doesn't really matter. And the idea is that, while it's pretty easy to build these tables as a company, as a product owner, it is much less easy to make it customizable and extendable by any end customer. And that is the idea of the knowledge graph, is that what makes it more extendable. So for instance, in here, we can go and say, well, in our world, while this is okay, this may not be sufficient, right? So maybe we need another node here. Maybe these are maybe our vendors, right? And maybe we say that I want to connect vendors to customers, right? And maybe add some articles for those things. for the vendors, right? Or maybe you want to say, hey, I also have some buyers that I want to connect to the vendors. And maybe users, I need to add a few more fields, and work item, I need to subclass it. So maybe we subclass it to issue and ticket, but actually I could subclass it farther to maybe feature request versus bugs, right? So you see how, given this model, we can go and extend it in pretty much any way that we would like. And maybe, let's say, maybe this bug has a relationship to a product catalog, but can also have relationship to a session, which is a user's recording of himself using that. Right, so you see how we can essentially build this ontology. That's what a graph schema is called, this ontology, larger and larger, and make it more comprehensive. And this is quite an important feature, because if you have that, what you can do afterwards is you can look something up. Let's say we're looking up a vendor. Let's say we're looking up this vendor here. Maybe I want to see all the work items that have some relationship with that, right? So maybe from the vendor go to the customer, from customer to the users and their sessions, and to the work items. Maybe I want to see all the people that have been contributing work to this vendor. Now, this kind of relationship, this is syntactic relationship, right? We say people work on work items, right? Work items contains sessions, right? Those are links, right? So this may have contains, and this link might be works on, right? So you can have these different links and you can describe what they are, but these give you an ability to syntactically, to logically be able to traverse around the graph and gain relative or related information to be used later for things. Maybe you want to count the number of work items, right? Well, that's pretty simple. But maybe also you want to cluster the different work items into buckets, right, of themes, right? So maybe these are all the bugs that has to do with some connection or some feature, and these are all the feature requests that has to do something with payments, right? So all those things you can now reach based on this connectedness of the graph, but it's not phrased up front. It's not something we just cooked up before, but something that you can build as a solution to a customer based on their needs. Any question? Oh, I see a question here. Very good question. So the question is, this is primarily what a relational database does. So how is it different? Well, it's not really different. What the difference is that this way, we're allowing it to be extendable, and the connection, the foreign keys are not something we define upfront and that we can, it's kind of rigid. In RDM, in relational database systems, you define the schema upfront, right? And then you concoct all your queries upfront too. Right, you say, these are the queries that gives me all the customers related to work items. This is the query that gives me all those things. But what if you start adding more things on top of that? Now you need to modify these queries, or even make it more emanating. Right? For example, in a graph, it's very normal to simply traverse a graph. There's algorithms for that, like BFS or DFS, where you start here and you say, go to everything related no longer than, let's say, 3 hops, right? So it's not so much the data structure that we're talking about. It's more the ability to traverse it, the ability to look at it as a more flexible entity, a data model that allows you to connect random things and to traverse things in a random way. And random means more contextual way that allows you to derive answers. However, this is not a technology choice. For instance, we did not write it, this thing using a graph database. There is no graph database underneath. This is actually collections on Mongo and searches, and we're going to cover a little bit of that moving forward. But it's actually built on top of relational and NoSQL databases, and the reason for this is so this can scale, because a regular graph database are either very challenged at scaling. For instance, Neo4j, which is probably one of the standards, can only live if all the nodes and relationships and edges are in RAM, right? So this cannot scale more than a single machine. So you'd have to get a huge machine for every customer, let's say, or maybe small to huge machines depending on the customer size. But you're not going to be able to have this multi-tenant. Okay, so so the fact that we are calling this a knowledge graph does not imply that there is a graph database underneath, or at least one that is a kind of standard. We actually built this our own using NoSQL and SQL databases that gives different perspectives into the same data. For example, a lot of the analytics can be done using SQL, and we're going to cover that soon, which is just another view into that particular model. I hope that answered the question. If not, please feel free to write a follow-up. All right. By the way, I haven't even gotten to the vector database or the regular database. Thank you, Shivaji. I'm going to cover this very, very soon, because these different databases that gives you different ways to access, it's some of the multi-faced layers that we have on top of this knowledge graph. Okay, so let me move on quickly unless there's more question. Okay, right. So we've done this. We're finished to define our ontology, our schema. We know what we need. How do we populate it? How do we go about putting data inside of this graph, right? It's one thing to make a schema. Another thing is to actually make it, contain the useful information. Yes.
So somebody has their hand raised.
I can't see that.
It's Vishwajit.
I'm only seeing the Q&As. Okay, yeah, please.
So please unmute and ask the question.
Yes. I'm waiting for the person with the raised hand to ask the question. Okay. I can see the raised hands, so if you have a question, it's probably better to just ask it under the Q&A section, because this I can immediately see. Okay. Thank you, Tani. All right. So let's continue. We talked about how do we populate the knowledge graph, because let's face it, right? DevRev is not yet that famous that people will pick it up as their very first tool and just start with DevRev on day 0 and put everything on top of that. We're not there just yet, hopefully soon. Right now, the way that it works is people have a few connected systems, or just a few systems with a lot of information, and we need to populate that knowledge graph that we have with all that information. And for that, we've built a tool that we call a tool that helps to do that. So let me just move a little bit. And this is our data sync tool. We also named this airdrop because that's what we want to express how easy it is to do. And usually after I give this session, we also go into demonstration of how easy this really is. But the idea is that we have a mechanism, or think about it like an interface almost, where if you implement a few functions, let's say, you can connect new systems to our knowledge graph. And this supports both one and two-way syncs. And just keep in mind, a one-way sync is not too terrible to do, right? Whenever there's changes here, go and make those here. Two-way syncs, on the other hand, is extremely difficult to do. And the reason it's difficult to do is because you don't have a single source of truth. And all of a sudden, there's a whole aspect of differences resolution. What if between the last sync time, both ends have changed the object, right? How do you know how to resolve it? And that's quite a complex thing. So DevRev actually invested a lot in this one and two-way data sync infrastructure. And right now it's we even have this interface, we call it airdrop as a service. And essentially anyone, third party, second party, first party, can write these ADAS snap-ins. We're going to cover snap-ins briefly soon, to be able to connect this to their systems. So while at DevRev, we've built a few standard ones like Jira, right? And like Salesforce. Oops, that's an E. Like Salesforce. And like Zendesk. And a bunch of more. We have others building different ones. For example, we had a third party build our ADO. Right? And there could be many, many, many more, right? And the nice thing is that as you select what you want to connect to, and you can connect more than one item. So you can connect one ADO that will cover, let's say, a certain area of your graph, and maybe another ADO object that maybe has to do more with customers, let's say, more around this side of the graph. It's totally fine. You can connect some related to a certain portion of the knowledge of the product catalog, and maybe another on another portion of the catalog, right? The catalog is kind of like our parts or our trails, if you guys have seen it, where you have your products and you have your capabilities and features. Okay, so this tool, this ability to provide one and two-way syncs is very crucial for DevRev, for both being able to adapt us gradually and slowly, so you don't have to replace everything for everyone at day one after a few hours of migration. But instead of this, you can start to onboard maybe one team, two teams. As they become more successful, maybe a third team, maybe another area, maybe now you go to build. So you can gradually expose DevRev into the organization by slowly adapting more. However, you can already at day one connect to everything. So the fact that I'm connected to Jira doesn't mean that I have to abandon Jira and just use DevRev. I'm just seeing everything that happens in Jira. And if I enable the two-way sync, then I can also do things within DevRev that will get reflected in Jira. I do say I have a question. If a customer has multiple system of records, such as AD, Zendesk, Jira, which one is considered a source of truth? A very good question. Well, those different systems won't exactly have the same information. So the Jira in your question might be more around the issues, right? So if this goes here, that would be the source of truth for the issues that came out of Jira, right? For the issues that maybe another team did without Jira, let's say directly within DevRev, DevRev is the source of truth, and that will get synced to Jira if it needs to. But then maybe Zendesk is more around the tickets, right? And maybe a few customers, right? So even those different systems different systems gets connected, each one is the source of truth for their objects, right? The ones that they transmitted over. And we actually retain this connection. So we say, hey, this ticket, particular instance of a ticket, this one is from, let's say, Salesforce. Right? So that is the source of truth for now, right? Whatever we do here gonna get reflected here. Whatever we do here gonna get reflected here. But right now we're still Salesforce is the source of truth. However, this issue maybe is coming from Jira or another tool. I hope this explained it, Siddharth. Feel free to ask follow-up if it didn't. Oh, good. I have more questions. How does DevRev decides which data to commit based on two resources with the data getting synced? So we're talking about the same data object that is coming from two different sources. Is that the question? Well, it wouldn't. We don't allow for the same ticket to come from different sources. The other way I can interpret this is, what if two changes happened there on the same field, I guess. Well, if it's different field and maybe based on the time of modifications, it gets resolved. I'm not too certain about all the nitty-gritty here, but there's some mechanism there to resolve it, and we can take this up afterwards if you require a deeper answer for this. This is about knowledge graph. Is there any specific metric that it helps business identify by building this knowledge graph, which other systems can do? Well, that's a great question. However, this is very, very low level. I don't know that the knowledge graph directly answers to any business need, but it allows a lot of business needs afterwards because of the way that you can connect things. And I'm going to get to some of those things as we proceed with this training. And but yeah, so the knowledge graph, the thing it allows you to do is connect many things together, right? And that in itself can produce a lot of business needs, like break down silos, like enable people to work on the same thing, even if they're different departments, maybe sales and product and pre-sales and maybe customer success. So it helps with those things that otherwise are completely disconnected, right? And today, if you look at that, if you think about it, a lot of company, actually any company I spoke with, and I spoke with quite a few customers, potential customers, they're all doing these things, cooking these things on their own. They all have someone who wrote some connection from their Jira to the Salesforce because they needed it, right? Or someone wrote some script that pushes notifications from Zendesk to Jira, or vice versa, so that the support folks can tell when something was done, right? It's needed. It's a real business requirement that people just don't have today. And every company rolls their own, and every company has to deal with what happens when the versions change. What happens when the tools get improved or even changed on their own, or when you need to grow now, and instead of the 2 teams that it kind of work, now you have 15 teams globally, and this thing that you've done doesn't scale or doesn't work anymore. So a lot of company, actually everyone that I've spoken with, is struggling with that ability to connect the information in. And that is just is being made possible by the knowledge graph. But you'll see a lot of the business utility of knowledge graph as we make progress in this discussion. All right. Let's continue. So now we know how we can populate this graph. We know that we can connect to things that we've built already, pre-built. We know we can connect things to things that we can build on our own. And we can even connect the tools that we can build for can even be internal tools. So maybe this is my internal tool, maybe behind a proxy, and I just need to make sure that there's a connection here. And then I can connect it to my legacy system that we've built in the whatever 80s, and I can populate my knowledge graph accordingly. So this gives us the ability to really live within the ecosystem of the different tools that exist in any company. Let me know if there are any further questions. For now, I'm gonna move on. So what happens with this? All right. So here, you are correct. Every company builds their own. This amplifies the maintenance of the solution. How does DevRev connect? Do you have tools already developed for those connectors, adapters? What do you mean by connect? Connect to what? Okay, so I'm assuming connections to these different tools. Is this what you meant? I'm not certain. Do you connect these different tools? Yes. Okay. Yeah. So as I said, I'm not going to go into the demo. I would have shown you the demo right now. I can just say that so there's a few elements here. This is actually a very good question. So there's a few steps here. So the first step is to establish a connection, literally a connection. This is done. So you create a tunnel to whatever end system you want to be on, right? Now, this tunnel requires some authentication. So, for example, we are supporting SAML, we're supporting SSO, we're supporting key, not key, but like API key and secret, so key secret pairs, many different kinds of of abilities to create connections. And what's nice about that is this connection gets a name, and once you authenticate even once, it now has a mechanism that can refresh your access tokens, which means that this connection can be kept alive. And now as you make a connection to a specific a tool, let's say Jira, right? So this is now your import. This is your import. This is your connection. In your import, you specify what connection you need. So you can have multiple connections. You can have many connections to the same Jira with different rights, different access rights, or different sub-projects or whatever. And you can say, well, this Jira import will use this connection 1, and maybe this Jira import, maybe for another piece of the catalog, would use connection 2. And then once you establish this connection, then there's a few steps. I'm just going to go over this in brief because I can't show it today. There are a few steps. The first step, once you establish this connection and initiate the import, is you select what objects you even want to bring. Okay, so this is number 1. Number 2, you select any filter. Maybe you say, I want these objects only if their third field, which maybe is date, is less than 6 months, and the name is, the owner is Shlomi. So you can put here any predicate, any if statement that would allow you to specify what you want to bring and into where. The third is to map objects. You say, okay, well, I'm bringing this object, but I want to map it to that object here. So this object coming from here, will get mapped to this object. So we have object mapping. Then we have field mapping. This field here will become that field over here. So you see how we can get really, really fine-grained. And maybe this field has these values, and these values will get translated to these values. Okay, so this is called a recipe, and you create this recipe once, and you create it once for each direction. So one moving this direction, the other moving that direction, because there might be differences. And then, so here we said field mapping. Then number 5 is actually to select the custom fields, which allows you to really see and tell how occupied this field is on the source system, which is actually a very unique business value. So this is how you create a connection and you import, and this is the same for each one. Let me see if we have any further questions. All right. Yeah, I see a question about data lakes. We're going to cover this very, very soon. So please just hold on. And I'm also seeing analogies, companies like ServiceNow, where they have made a hyper automation layer, which connects various systems of records and ingest data. Right. Can be used to integrate with any system to perform tasks or automate things. What differentiates there? Right. Well, DevRev is just, it's more features. For example, the automations we do, and I'm going to cover it soon, they can be any code. It doesn't have to be low code. It doesn't have to be within the realms just of DevRev. It can connect to anything, not just what's got supported out of ServiceNow. So I hope that this is a good enough answer. Okay, let's continue. So we have this system. We know how we can connect tools, existing or new connections. What happens down the line? So, okay, so we made these connections and now people are starting to work. Maybe someone made a modification to this user. Maybe someone opened a new work item or closed one. Maybe new people were added and parts were changed. Sessions got recorded. So work has happened either because of the sync or because people literally work within DevRev's app, APIs, webhooks, anything that DevRev's exposes. Any change at all to this knowledge graph is propagated throughout the DevRev infrastructure using a tool called CDC, change data capture. It captures any change in data and it sends these changes to different places, okay? And different tools within the ecosystem can specify what changes they care about. right? And based on these changes, they can do further actions. So let's see two of the main building blocks here. Okay, so we're saying first thing, we get a search engine. Any modification in any object would get transmitted into our search engine. And if you pay attention, you'll notice that this is two-faced. We have the syntactic face and the semantic face. And the reason we need every change to go here is because everything needs to be indexable again as things change, right? So let's see, the syntactic version of the search engine, this is like your regular search, your Google search, your Glean search, okay? This is essentially a reverse index, right? Terms with reverse documents or objects where they are from. So maybe we want to look for a term Shlomi, and in here we found that Shlomi exists in the people object as person 50, right? And Shlomi also was mentioned in a work item. So this thing will give you objects where these syntactic tokens were mentioned, or in any way. It could be a stemmed version, or a typo version of the same word. There's a certain amount of flexibility you can add onto those syntactic indexers, but this is what it is essentially. This is a regular search into the knowledge graph. Now, why is it useful? Because this can give you an object, but then you can go and traverse the graph to gather the bigger context around this object. All right, the other face is our semantic face, right? And the semantic face is what allows us to look at this knowledge graph in a more of an associative memory kind of way. Are there any work items that are talking about latency issues? We're not looking for the word latency like in syntactic search. We're looking for the semantic meaning of something being slow, right? So now we can, let's say, bring about work items that semantically seems to be related to slowness of the app, to performance issues. Many different things can come out of that. And this is very, very important in the world of AI. Why? Because we use that as kind of like our associative memory, right? When someone asks a person a question, his brain will fetch information that is relevant, associative information that seems close to that question, and we will assemble the answer based on what we recall, right? This is that associative memory. Okay. Now, it's important to know, at least as partners of DevRev, that we actually built this entire thing on our own, right? For example, the knowledge graph, we built completely on our own. The search engines, we built on our own. So the syntactic search is our own version of Lucene search that is very scalable, and we can control it very deeply. It is also multi-tenant. Also, the semantic search, we actually implemented our very own vector database. When we started, vector databases were not as prominent as they are today, so we couldn't just pick something off the shelf, but there are other reasons too. For example, none of those was multi-tenant. Right now, what does it mean? If I have to roll out a new database for every customer, this can become extremely expensive very, very fast. And this actually can explain why sometimes just adding AI for some of our competitors in its own self costs as much as DevRev seat, just to add AI, for instance, right? Or at least close to that. But we couldn't do that. We thought very early on that there is no DevRev without AI, just like there is no car without a wheel. We don't believe that we can give DevRev without AI features. There is no license mode that excludes AI. So we needed to find mechanisms of making this scalable, both technologically as well as financially. So we actually built this entire thing. It's multi-tenant, very, very strict, so there's no data leakage. But we also can control what the documents look like, how we access them. So for instance, we have audience for different documents here. And by documents, I mean nodes in the graph. We can say, hey, this should be allowed to this group of internal or even external audience to view. And so now when the AI, let's say, is trying to answer a question, depending on the persona and his access rights, he will get different recollections, right? Different semantically related content that would power his answer. So that means that I might not get the same answer to someone else because I might have more or less access rights. Another thing that we've built here is the pipeline to produce these semantic similarities. These are called embeddings. We don't have to get into the depth of that at this point in time, but the idea is that an embedding is a mathematical representation of an intent, of a semantic meaning. And the nice thing is that these mathematical representations actually define a distance between them, right? Like we can compute between any 2 points, but the distance can be made semantically. So things that are shorter in distance are actually closer semantically speaking. So a dog and a cat would be closely together than, let's say, a dog and a table. I'm seeing a question here. What is the criteria for persona-based responses? How does it choose different answers for different users? So it doesn't choose different answers. It comes up with different answers based on the information that's getting retrieved. So this is a bit touching a topic called RAG. I don't know if you are familiar. Let me give a very, very brief introduction to RAG. The RAG is retrieval augmented generation. This is the retrieval part, right? So what does it mean? It means the following. I have a question asked. The question has a bunch of tokens, right? If I feed this into an LLM, where can an LLM find me a response to this question? Well, without anything else, there are 2 things that the LLM can do. It can look within its own knowledge, right? Its own neural network, meaning this is trained, right? I think I'm misspelling here, but it's hard to write. Anyway, trained. That's one. The other place it can look for answers is within the content of the question, right? This is called put it in the prompt, for instance. Either of these is not sufficient, not for our use case, right? Our question, let's say the answer is within a work item. The question is not going to get the answer. It doesn't know which work item, right? The LLM is not going to get trained on these work items. No. Training is, first and foremost, is extremely expensive in terms of energy. Musk, for instance, announced that he will be building nuclear power facilities to train his systems, right? So training is extremely expensive, but also training embeds the information in a way that you cannot control, right? I cannot remove something from memory, from the LLM's internal trained memory. So what we do not do at DevRev is we do not train LLMs. Okay, so if these are the only 2 ways, how can we actually produce answers from this? Well, this is where RAG comes in. So the LLM or the engine says, I know the intent of this question. Put this intent in the semantic search engine. That would now find different things. So maybe for me, because I'm an internal user, maybe at a certain group, I get access to these tickets, but an end customer only get access to these articles. So my answer would be coming from more up-to-date, more recent, more correct, or more full, or even maybe the other way, more experimental information. Maybe it's not done yet. Versus a customer who's only going to get from published articles. So at least I know that what I'm saying to him is what he could find on his own if he looked at our knowledge base, for instance, right? So this is what it does. So this semantic search is going to fetch those things depending on who you are, right? Whatever you have access to. And then once those things are fetched, the LLM is going to consider those as well, right? This is, in a nutshell, what RAG is. I hope I answered the question. Let's continue. So we spoke about the semantic search engine and how it allows you to find things within the knowledge graph that are related conceptually or associatively to the question. But then, those could be the roots, and then you can expand this context gathering phase of the RAG with the knowledge graph. So maybe it got you the work item, but you actually care about all the product catalogs that are related to that, right? So these search engines, both of those, serves as ways to identify individual nodes, and those nodes would be served as roots for further investigation or traversal of the graph to fetch more of the relevant information upwards to the LLM to give out a response. Okay, I hope this made sense. I know this was a lot. Let me know in the questions if you have many more questions. Meanwhile, let's continue. So in here we see the data warehouse, and there was a question before about data warehouse. Let me find it. Okay. Yeah, here. Data lakes and data warehouses. We also have a data warehouse. However, notice I'm not calling this thing a data lake. And there is a very good reason why I'm not. Let me illustrate this for you. So imagine a data lake, and I'm going to do it in blue, like the water in the lake, right? And you see all the water coming down the lake. What do we have here at the top? At the top, we have all the different applications that pour their information into the lake, right? So maybe this is application 1, and this is 2, and this is 3. And what do we have downstream? What do we have at the end of the data lake? Well, here we usually just have reports, right? We have reports here. Well, guess what? These reports is going to be extremely difficult to go from a line item in the report to exactly which tool and which record and see where the information came from. Why is it like, why does this say it's 58? I thought it was going to be 60, but how can I check that? How can I go back to it? Well, you can't, because there is a notion of downstream and upstream, and things downstream lose their relationship with things upstream. And that is something that becomes very difficult to deal with, because what happens is that now people who are familiar with the report, they can read the report. People not familiar, they don't know where it's coming from. They don't know what it is. People who are looking at the report might want to ask, why 58? Why this ticket? Why this thing is here? But they have to know how this thing was constructed to be able to trace back into which product. And then they have to hold the report in one hand or one part of the screen, and the product they finally were able to find in the other part of the screen. And they have to say, this looks like it's ticket 54. Let's type ticket 54 here. And it is like enormous back and forth just to investigate the report that you have. We think that this is not ideal at all, so we don't like this directionality. And this is why we call it a data warehouse. I sometimes refer to this as a data pond, right? Where the tools are here, are within the information, really, right? Or at least the data model, at least the knowledge graph, right? The tools might be coming from elsewhere. But now the report is going to be directly related to those things. So for example, in DevRev, you can hover over a line item in a report, it'll take you to the object. Or if you click on it, it'll take you to the list of objects that comprises this number. So this 58, click on it. It'll show you exactly how it came to the 58. And for every line item, you can just hover over it and it'll open up. And you can chat on it and you can ask, hey, why is this not closed yet? It looks like the last response was a month ago, right? Or hey, why is this thing unassigned? So you can interact with your analytics. Your analytics actually becomes nothing more than just another surface that you can use, right? So you're not limited to just these tabular view or other particular views that we might have came up with, you can make your own view and you can essentially work within that view. All right, so I hope this makes sense. What's the difference and why we stand out? As a matter of fact, we've had companies talking to us just on the terms of replacing the data lake to something more cohesive. And then imagine on top of that, because all the other tools, you get conversational AI to speak about your analytics, or these advanced searches or abilities to simply answer directly to the customer based on the different articles or objects that you are exposing. So this is some of the differentiators here. But let's see. Let's continue. So now we have this data warehouse, and this data warehouse is going to be huge because it's actually tracking every change to every object. All right, so it's going to be very huge, very, very fast. But how are we going to use that to deliver analytics to every person in the company? So this is another big piece of the puzzle here. We really wanted to bring AI to everyone in the company, whoever uses DevRev. We really wanted to also bring analytics to every person in the company. Why is that not trivial? Why isn't simply everyone have analytics? Well, usually because analytics is done on the back end, right? You need large servers that can crunch all these numbers, that can ingest all this huge data, and that can power these very specifically made analytics boards. And if you need any change, then your request will go up to the server to crunch all the new numbers and to bring those down. So now if you provision, let's say, a large server, it still can only host, let's say, 10 concurrent users. But what if you have 100? What if you have 3,000? What if you're a large enterprise, right? So it was very evident very early on that this simply wouldn't scale. We wouldn't be able to give every last tech lead, let's say, the ability to define their own analytics about how their team is progressing, for instance, right? So for this, we've came up with something really neat, and we're using some pretty advanced technology for that. So we write these summarization jobs that essentially are more specific towards the kind of analytics you want, what you need. And the job of this summarization job, as the name alludes to, is to condense the information to what's needed for the presentation of the analytic dashboard, widget, whatever that may be. So while in here I may have, let's say, the entire history of all of the interaction on all the tickets, maybe in here I want a summarization job. It'll show me just the last couple of interactions. I want to see the last few people who touched them, for instance, right? So I can now cut this very much in order to be able to transmit this thing. But why do we need to cut this down? Well, because we want to move this information to a time series database that actually lives on the edge, right? On your laptop. So now what happens is the analytics becomes nothing but a definition. So we define analytics in a JSON. The JSON defines the relationships of the different data, right? So which data do you need, data tables, and which links, which connections, and so forth, and maybe even the SQLs. Here in the summarization job, you can define the SQLs that might be doing some really very heavy number crunching, maybe windowed functions that does complex stuff. It takes a lot of time. You do that on the summarization job because that runs in a large, data warehouse environment, but then the result is more condensed version that gets automatically pushed to the browser whenever you load up a particular analytics page. So now this is running in your browser. We use DuckDB under the surface and WebAssembly, which is a technology that allows you to run compiled code in your browser. And actually all the analytics is done on your laptop. Okay. And this is very, very important because First of all, it can be made accessible to anyone, but also it's on your app. It's in your app. So now let's say this is the report that we've built, as you hover over something, this has a direct link to its object. And you can simply see the object. You can hover over it, you can click on it, you can change it right there and then. You can interact with it right from your analytics, which is also a big differentiator. Now, on top of this, oopsie daisy, on top of this, we've also built a few built-in analytics and dashboards. So we have here, let's say, Customer 360, right? Which is a very comprehensive dashboard that can take, all this information and produce a customer score, for instance, and even break it down on a time series in a time series way into the reasons why various things happened within it. We have Product 360 and we have Session 360. We have Developer 360, which is probably some of the more elaborate ways to assess developers in the market today. And I should know, I actually ran that team for over a year developing this Developer 360. We actually used a research paper by Microsoft and GitHub about how to assess developers' work. It's called Space Framework. I can talk to you more about this if time permits later, if you'd like. But all these things give you immense detail into what's happening. But this is just the things we pre-cooked. And remember, these are connected directly into the knowledge graph. So I can go up to here and see that person and see what he's working on and see what customers he's affecting by traversing all those different things. However, this isn't the end of this, right? I mean, you can go as a second party, as a partner, but also as a customer and produce a new one, right? Maybe you need another dashboard for your product management or your project management, right? How many milestones have been hit in time versus late milestones, and maybe you want to score your project managers and do things based on this. So you can build whatever you want, and you can control the access and give access to whoever you want, and this thing will allow you to get this information. So remember, this isn't just analytics on DevRev's information. This is analytics on any information you connected. For example, in here, we use GitHub and Jira and ADO. In Customer 360, we use information from Zendesk and Salesforce and others. So it's whatever you have. So if you now connected your legacy system and you connected it here, you built some customization and you connected it, let's say, in some way here, you can now build analytics for your legacy systems. Analytics that will actually come up within DevRev and allow you to work on it as long as you transition the information over to DevRev. I see a question here. Do you mean to say we can replace project management tools? Well, we can. However, it's not as evolved as some of the tools that exist today. We have all the facilities. We have the flexible data model. We have the ability to add a lot of logic, and we're going to cover that next into it. However, we didn't focus on that yet, so it's not something that I would push on to customers today. But certainly, in some times, if we invest the effort there, this can become a tool for project management too. Absolutely. So while not today, definitely the option exists. I'm seeing another question. Which public LLM provider do you use? Does any data leave DevRev system to generate responses? Well, that's a great question. Actually comes a lot with customers because it's real. It's a real problem. So, okay, first thing to know is that we have built, first thing to know is that we were built, DevRev was built around the same time that OpenAI was built, right? So we actually started before LLM boom happened. And then when it did happen, maybe a couple of years ago already, it wasn't clear, still not clear, who's going to be the winner. Is it going to be OpenAI? Is it going to be Microsoft's? It's going to be Elon Musk's. Who's is going to be the best? And is there a best? What if for some things, one is better than the other, right? What if for some things, a smaller model actually gives me more precise results, but other things, the larger model gives me more comprehensive results, right? So what I'm trying to say here is that we build the systems so that you can plug those different LLMs. You can control, right? You can control which vendor you need. You can control which model. You can even control for which task. And you can say, for those tasks, use this model from this vendor. For those tasks, use my own hosted Llama LLM, right? So you can get as much flexibility as you want with this. However, different choices would reflect different pricing models because they just mean different things. For example, if you want to roll your own LLM, we have to provision pods for you to run that thing, right? So you'll have to pay for that versus pay for subscription if you want to bring your LLM or use ours where we have very good deals with, let's say, OpenAI and the rest to do it, more to do, for example, at an enterprise grade where they don't store any information. So regarding information, yeah, we do send the snippets that were ragged in into the LLM to generate a response, but we only use LLMs that are enterprise grade. So, where you sign an agreement that this data would not be used externally. But if this is insufficient for a certain customer, they can certainly bring their own. I hope I answered this question. Any further questions before I move onwards to the next topic? All right, cool. So now we've covered all the data model. How do we phrase it? How do we populate it? How do we look into it and how do we report on it? But what about actions? Well, the very next thing is our workflow engine. Now, this thing, I can talk about this for an hour on its own, but this is one of the biggest mechanisms that we have that allows us to extend DevRev to almost any imaginable scenario other than things that needs to change the UI itself, pretty much. So any logic that you need to run. So let's look at it. It has multiple layers. At the very lowest layer, it has what we call as snappings. Snappings. Okay? Snappings essentially are pieces of code that you submit to DevRev. Okay, DevRev has a CLI tool, a command line interface tool that allows you to package and deliver these code snippets or code projects. It doesn't have to be small. But then alongside this code, which can be really in any language as this is a container, you also provide a manifest file. And the manifest file is actually extremely interesting. First thing that it details is what kind of change you might have here that you would want this code to get triggered on. Okay, I'm seeing a question here. Is DevRev meant more for technology product company and not for traditional industries? For example, within insurance industries? No, not necessarily at all. We're actually have a few customers in the insurance and other industries. Product is certainly very good for DevRev, but no, we have services and we can really mold this to anything that makes sense. So no, I think not just, okay. So remember, we had these change events here. The manifest can say, whenever a new user added, invoke this code. Whenever a work item got moved to done, invoke this code, okay? However, maybe you say, but I don't just want to do something here. I want my code, because it's just code. It's anything you'd want to write there. I want this to maybe invoke an API on some other system that they have. Well, that's great, right? Remember when we said here you have a connection manager. that has a name and a way to refresh tokens. Well, in here, you can specify what type of connections you need. So as you install the snap-in, you will have to select the connection that you need. This manifest also defines what will be the configuration required, and this will get translated into a very nice UI element that allows the user to fill this in, right? So you see how we can do anything, really. We can react to any event within the system. We can even react to any webhook, right? So if you have a legacy system or another hosted system, and that system can emit a webhook whenever something changes internally, we can react to that too and invoke our code. So you see that the workflow engine is essentially boundless. We can define anything as a trigger point, including a timer. We can say, just run these things once a day, right? That was supposed to be an arrow. And then it can execute any code in any language. Okay, so now you can actually use this to automate something in another application altogether, as long as we get access to it. Okay, so this is an extremely powerful way of extending DevRev, but also you don't need to manage that. You write the code, that's true, right? But you don't need to manage that. Is it running? Is it scaling? Is there a memory leak? No one cares, right? Why? Because the architecture is this is running inside a Lambda function, if you're familiar with AWS. So it's your own tenanted bare metal instance that's running for a few milliseconds or seconds, as much as you need this code to run, up to 15 minutes. And it's spun specifically for you. There's never going to be a leak of information. Even if you have some, let's say, some memory leak, it's okay. It's going to run for a couple of minutes and terminate. It's not a big deal. It's not like a long-running server that cannot break. It has in this manifest file all the configurations. So DevRev does all the plumbing, connects to the right connection to the external tool, provides the secret keys, do all the configurations as we've just defined them here. Everything that you need is getting pre-populated in this Lambda environment, Lambda function, and your code gets executed. And then we can even track how many executions have a particular company made, how much did it cost, and so forth. So this makes it extremely simple to extend. You just write the code. You don't even manage the runtime. I am seeing a question. What is the use case for this workflow engine? And does customers has to keep writing modifying code in this workflow engine? Well, that really depends. What are the use case? The use case is to extend the DevRev to anything you'd like, right? So if, for example, you onboard onto DevRev and you say, I need something to automate my Jira and send people reminders whenever their issues is getting near the expected time to delivery. No problem. You can write code to do that, right? Or you can say, I want you to cluster all my tickets and look at the themes and find people who haven't worked on something like this in the last 6 months and give them a note if they want to do this. Whatever. I'm just making those things up, right? But you can write, essentially, the use case is that whatever business requirement you can have, it will consist of two things: data model to represent it and action to execute, right? You need, if there's a business requirement, you need data to find out about it, to modify as a result, and you need something that gets triggered and does some action. So I hope this made sense. However, this is still rather low level. Do we really need a coder to say whenever all child issues are closed, close the parent issue? No. Not necessarily, right? I mean, this is something that could be written in another higher level. So there's also a higher level here that allows you to define workflows. All right, I'm not going to write the whole word, workflows. And this is much more graphical. So now in these workflows, I can say, here is my trigger. And maybe I have more than one trigger. Now, any of these triggers happened, I want you to do this step, And actually, I want you to, in parallel, do these two steps. And then here, based on some if condition, I want you to either do this step or that step, right? So at the end, this would be completed, and either this or that would be completed, right? So this is a workflow and something you can write. However, we are all, probably anyone who touched this thing know that this starts this small, but very soon this becomes way too complex to manage. And what happens, you start needing a contractor company to help you manage those things. And one of the reasons that we've identified is because there's a lot of like syntactic thing that you have to encode here. For example, maybe you want to classify a ticket. Well, if it has these words or these things, and so you start to have this like long if-else chains or switch statements, and those things would probably have a somewhat of a failure rate, right? Maybe a regular expression, but someone wrote with a with a typo, and the regular expression just went out the window. So one of the differences that we can do is we can actually make any of these nodes be an AI node. And this is really, really new because what we are showing here is that we can actually connect deterministic workflow, right? Sequential, parallel, branches, loops. Those are all deterministic control flows with an AI, or I like to say it, contextually non-deterministic workflow, right? So maybe, let's say in here, I want to say, if this ticket seems to talk about something that we don't have in the product, right? Then it's a feature request. If it seems to talk about something that is not working well, that is a bug. And otherwise, you just don't know, right? I actually have examples that have prompts not much larger than what I just said, and it works 90+% of the time, right? Because the LLM, the pre-trained LLM, can still detect, is this text talking about something new that they wish they had? Hey, could you add a button here? Semantically, it's that, right? Semantically, can you add a button here does not imply a bug, right? But something like, hey, this button keeps throwing an error, that implies a bug, right? So all of a sudden you can have these AI, these non-deterministic nodes. And I say non-deterministic because this is now language-based. I can't reason about it outside of human language. I can't write an equation and mathematically reason about it. But I can say, hey, if this looks like something, if this behaves like something, if it seems like the customer is happy, do that. And if not, do something different. And the nice thing also is that we can even add AI nodes here, but also AI nodes farther down the line to maybe validate whatever this thing said. And maybe this thing can use a different LLM that maybe is more suitable at validating than this LLM that maybe is more suitable for intent classification. But even more than that, remember all the full code stuff we wrote here? Well, you can actually give a full code and you can attach it, or you can create a node type out of that. So now you can add a new node type, and that node type does this code. So you can have one developer or a team of developers write these important building blocks, but now any non-developer can go and use them in this graphical way. So you see how this whole thing becomes a pretty elaborate mechanism that is fully managed in terms of security, in terms of cost, in terms of scale, in terms of tenancy, and allows you to define your business processes that you might need based on all the information you already have. And because you can write any code, you can change anything in any tool, including DevRev, obviously, but other tools as well. So now let's say that you've worked really hard and you came up with this like beautiful workflow. It makes your life so good. And you're like, you know what? This can be used by anyone else, really. What you can do is you can actually package that up. You can package it up and you can put it in the marketplace, right? And now in the marketplace, this thing can switch from becoming, let's say, an expense to becoming a revenue, right? Because maybe other organizations, other customers, like, hey, this is very useful. I could use it, and maybe you want to charge something for that. We still don't have the monetization piece done here, but it's coming. It'll be there, right? So the idea is that once you've done this thing, and this can come together with certain customization, so you can package the customization as well as all the code that would power that customization up, put it on the marketplace, give it a nice title, description. You're going to get reviews from other people using that, and you can roll it up, and people can use this thing. Any questions? We don't have a lot more time, so I want to finish up soon. Any questions before we move onward? All right, cool. So this portion kind of covered the basic architecture of DevRev. Okay, now we can talk about it, and I can make the case that this is kind of like an operating system, right? You can schedule processes, you can control your file system, you can import things, like loading up a CD or downloading things from the web. You have your ability to look for things. You have ability to report. So this is like building blocks to building applications. So let's see some of the applications that DevRev has built. And you see that there is a height dimension here. The more up you are, the more you are closer to the end customer, right? So you can see this chat widget, which internally we call it plug. And this thing is made available directly to your end user. Or if you're a partner, your customer's end user, okay? And this widget actually can have direct access, either authenticated or not, and we can control that. It may mean different things. Direct access to your workflow engine or your search engine, which then gives you access to the knowledge graph, right? So directly from the chat, let's say the intent is the user coming in, hey, I forgot my password. Maybe there's a workflow for that. Hey, validate the user, re-authenticate the user, send them an email, check the response, invoke those APIs to make the reset, right? So now your end customer can actually be able to utilize this environment without even a human or a support agent, at least, if not a human, in the loop, right? You can come up with all these different workflows that can be serving directly to the end customers. I see a question. Let me take that. You can make the snap-ins only when we have a strong knowledge graph and data with it, else snap-in may be not powerful. Well, you can make the snap-in whenever you want. The question is, when should it run? It should run in a response to some event, and the event probably implies that there is data there. So making the snap-in is like writing the code. You write it before you have anything, or once you have something and you want to debug or test it, or you have an idea what you want to happen. But then when you deploy it, it needs to run on actual data. I hope that this answers your question. Let me know if it didn't. Okay, so the plug widget, thank you. So yeah, yes, I can share a high-res image. Actually, so about there's a request if I can share this image. So this is my own note taker tool, and this is actually my own notes. I have asked for help from our designers to put this into a more presentable format, and I had a promise that someone will help me. So give me just maybe maybe 1-2 days or so to see if I can get a better, not so hacky version of this, and I'll share that. If not, and I'll share this specific format with you. Okay, so and then in the middle we have the search bar, and the search bar is actually it's in the middle because it can be embedded within our apps for the internal people, as well as it's actually within the plug. So this thing can be made available to any customer. So it could be your customers or your
customers and users. And this also can give you access to the workflows and the search engine, right? So maybe the search needs to do something more advanced and it requires a workflow, no problem. It can do that. And if it needs to just use semantic and just get the objects and produce an LLM response, a human language response, it can do that too. And then also we've built these tools. We've built this support app, which is kind of like a Zendesk replacement, and Build, which is kind of like a Jira replacement, and Grow app, which is kind of like a Salesforce replacement. But unlike those three, these apps don't live in isolation. They're actually within the same exact environment and certainly relies on the same exact data, right? So data that you work with in Grow can be used by support, and escalation from support can be seen and acted on by Build. And as Build finishes up, these guys can see and these guys can see. And if it's been made available, then this can even go to the plug and directly inform users. So you see that these are applications. This is like, Windows, the operating system would have only been so useful if it didn't have Word and Excel and slides. Or Mac would only be this useful if it didn't have any of the great apps it has. So we needed to not just build an operating system, but to also build actual apps. And those are the things that we start at selling, right? We say, hey, we have problem with support, we can help you. But really what I want you to think or to take out of this session is all the different possibilities, right? So now if a customer says, well, not support, but I actually have this fourth use case here. Wait, can we model that here? Can we write the code to power that? Can we benefit from connected data to supplement the context of their use case? Can we provide some analytics? Do they need analytics on top of that? Well, if so, why not use DevRev as the building blocks for the solution? And by the way, it can be a meta solution like Zendesk. It's a meta solution because it's not it doesn't build the product. It assists the product, it assists the customer. We actually have customers with Docity, for example, that use DevRev, use this engine to power their startup, their product, I mean. So their product actually uses this knowledge graph as their data store and these workflows as their logic, right? The only thing they had to write is just the UI that interfaces using our APIs and webhooks to the engine. So don't only think of DevRev as a support replacement or a build replacement or a grow replacement. I want you to take this and think of DevRev as an operating system that can power many, many different use cases. I see a question by Kalyan. Is the knowledge graph automatically populated once we feed the data, or should we model it? That's a very good question. Actually, it comes up often. So first thing to know about knowledge graphs or graphs in general, there's a reason why they're not more famous, because this isn't new. Graph theories and graph logic has been there for many, many, many years. The reason it's barely used is because, first of all, technically, it's a big challenge. As we mentioned initially, the graph database are too abstract for their own good, and the requirements are through the roof because of that. But also, it is very hard conceptually. For instance, depending on what you want to do, there might be severe differences if you form your links in this direction versus, for example, that direction. Anyone who ever tried to work with a graph database came across this. And guess what? You can't always do two directions, because then you can start have loops. So it becomes extremely difficult to model something in a graph environment in a really robust way. And what we've done at DevRev is we came up with the right ontology for all the basics that we want to support. So any tool that we bring out, we will come up with the right ontology for that, the one that makes sense and that we can do all the things we need to do. However, if you bring your own objects, you write your own two-way one or two-way sync, and you bring your own object ontology, you will have to do some thinking, right? How should you model that? How should it get populated? So it's true that it gets automatically populated whatever we have built, because we know the ontology, we know the best ontology to represent the data. We do and can use AI to help derive some of the links and connections. It's definitely things we can do. But other than that, if it's custom data, the customer or the vendor would have to think how to model this. I hope this is a good answer. And I'm seeing another question here. If a customer wants to use time series only and not the app like support, can they use it and how is this licensed? Well, that's a great question. A first answer is yes, essentially they can use. They can use it as long as, at least right now, it's not just pure data warehouse. Because they would miss out on all the goodness that we bring, right? I mean, sure, we can bring, sorry. I'm trying to move my screen. There we go. Sure, we can deliver just these two elements here, but is this a good enough reason to use DevRev, right? When you hover over something, you won't get anything and you can't do anything. So what is the benefit? So it's probably better to find a use case. It doesn't have to be grow, build, or support. It could be another use case, but let's find that use case. Make sure that there is usefulness in the tool too, right? There's something to model in the knowledge graph. There's some work they want to do with it, not just the analytics on top, and maybe some workflows they want. However, this is a very broad and very general comment that I've made. If you find a use case like that, feel free to reach out, and we can ideate on it together. Is this the right fit, or what else can we go back and ask them? How can we increase the scope or focus it if it's too broad? So definitely feel free, as partners, to talk with us also and figure out, like, is this a real use case or not real? So I hope this is a good answer. And 2 minutes to 9:30 a.m. my time, I am done with my content. We can open it up for any further questions. We have 5 more minutes. Shiv, feel free to also join and wrap up if you'd like.
Thank you, Swami, for delivering a great session. Let's ask the audience if they have any specific questions. We can answer that later on. However, this session was pretty detailed and insightful, is what I believe.
Thank you so much, Shiv. And I hope that this made sense. I know that this isn't your normal kind of demo, and I think you'll get more standardized demo moving forward. And now let me restate what I said initially. The idea here is to let you guys build a framework of how to think about DevRev. What's the art of possible and why is it possible? Why we say those things. So I hope that this was useful in that terms. You should have my email in the invite at least. Feel free to reach out if you have further questions about this. If you want to go a deeper dive, if you want to see something in more details, I'll be more than happy to schedule another one of these and really go deep into it. So thank you, everyone. And also thank you for the warm words. I'm happy that this was useful. And yeah, I think it's now time for you to have your evening back. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, folks. And we do have, practical sessions in terms of product, enablement in the upcoming sessions. So please do sign up and register if you haven't. Yeah, have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.